Hi, this is Cypher and welcome to this next video in which I'm going to be looking at chords. Now we're not going to be looking at teaching you how to play chords. I'm going to be coming at this from a beginner's perspective and I'll explain a little bit more in just a moment, so don't go away. Hi, you're watching my 6-string journey, and on this channel I'm documenting my journey learning to play the electric guitar. I cover reviews of all of my lessons, my highs, my lows, the hurdles, how I overcame them, and also the gear that I'm using. So if you haven't already, please support the channel by hitting the subscribe button, and if you like this video, please hit the like button. It's very, very much appreciated. Now I should point out that I am not a professional guitar teacher by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still very much a beginner, but a number of people have commented on the fact that my chords are getting better, and they have expressed an interest in what I've done to actually crack the problem that I've had for the longest time. Now, for those of you that don't follow me, when I was trying to teach myself using online videos and I was trying to play that dreaded D chord, I very nearly gave up trying to learn to play the guitar because I spent weeks and weeks and weeks, and my chord would sound like this, and my fingers would hurt, and it would sound just horrible, and it didn't matter what I did, I could not get a clean sounding chord. I then went to Michael and took out some professional guitar lessons, and within a very short period of time I was playing a clean D, and there were a number of things that he did to help me to learn the chords, and that's what I want to cover in this video. So very often when you start to learn the guitar, particularly if you're trying to teach yourself online, your guitar tutor will turn around and say online, we're going to play a D chord, and you play it by putting your first finger here and ring finger there and your middle finger there, and you play these strings and it sounds lovely and that's all you've got to do, and now just go away and practice. Well, that's great, but you've got to decide where your fingers need to be, and you've also got to realise that you need to have short nails and all sorts of different things. And also you don't realise that it takes sometimes a long time to learn these. One of the revelations for me is I was struggling with the G chord for the longest time. And there was one video, and I forget who the guy was now, but it was one of the online videos, and he said, don't worry, it can take you 6, 8, 12 weeks to get this chord. And at that point I realised, okay, the fact that I'm not getting this in a few hours is not a problem. And that was one of the big things that I learnt from going to Michael, and that I've since learnt, is that very often you won't find these chords very easy. And I found it very frustrating initially, because the riffs, I could get a riff down in 10, 15, 20 minutes. Chords was taking me hours just to play a clean chord, and I didn't realise that that is quite normal. So that's number one, is don't give up. If you start to struggle initially, that's quite normal. One of the big game changers for me was to cut my nails. Now my nails grow really, really long, really quickly, and I actually cut mine every couple of days, right the way down to the bottom of the white part. And why that's important is if your nails are too long, it actually rotates your finger and you end up starting to play with this fleshy part rather than the tip of your finger. So what was happening is, it was, instead of my finger being in that location, it would actually come over more, so that I was muting the high E string. And that was one of the big causes of frustration for me. So in cutting my nails and then moving on to the very absolute tips of my fingers made a huge difference. And now if I look at the lines on my fingers, my lines are literally on the very, very tips, just behind where my fingernail is. And I'm starting to get lines in exactly the same places, and then I can get a clean chord. So, number one, fingernails and using the absolute tips of your fingers. And sometimes when you see people playing online, their fingers appear to be pretty much flat. When you're learning, you've really got to learn to curl your fingers around, so almost like this shape, and really get your fingers over onto your fingertips. And again, that isn't something that's overly obvious in all of the online video lessons. So that was a big game changer for me. The other thing that I did when I first started to play is I used to push down really heavily on the string, which made my fingers hurt after 5, 10, 15 minutes, and that meant my practice sessions were much shorter and not as productive. I have to say, definitely not as productive. And one of the things that Michael taught me in the early days was when I'm playing the chords to just apply a very small amount of pressure, and you'll find initially you'll get a really dull sounding chord. Sounds horrible. So just apply the pressure a little bit more until you can get a clean chord sounding. Now I'm probably using half the amount of pressure that I did when I first started, and that then means that I can now play the chords for probably 20 minutes to half an hour. And I tended to find that when I was only playing for 15 minutes and my fingers were hurting, I was getting really frustrated. But now that I can practice my chords for half an hour, they start off a bit ropey, they get better towards the end of that half-hour session, and I leave the session thinking that that was productive, I've moved forward, I can do it, and I'm in a much more positive place between my sessions, which is good, because then you want to pick up the guitar rather than leaving it in the box for a couple of days. So I would say just very little pressure, apply a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, until you can get a clean chord, and you'll find then it's not hurting your fingers quite so much. The other thing that didn't come across very obvious when I was learning online was my thumb, and Michael picked this up for me very quickly, the fact that I tend to keep my thumb in the same position all the time, and annoyingly that is still something that is a hangover from trying to teach myself. And for a lot of chords, you've got to move your thumb around the back of the neck a lot, and your elbow. It needs to be flexible, and you need to be able to move. So again, you need your thumb in a different position for each chord, so I won't go through that in too much detail, but don't keep your thumb fixed in the same place like I did. Try and have that free floating on the back of the neck. So then when I was learning the chords, what I would do, I had a specific practice routine that worked really well for me. First of all, I would put my fingers down one at a time. Don't worry about putting them all down together. When you're watching a lot of the teachers online, they'll go, play a D chord, put your fingers down here, their fingers all go down together and they strum the chord. And you think, how hard can that be? You then try, and it's really hard. What I did is 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, get them all adjusted in the right place, regardless of how much time that takes, and then strum it. 1 string at a time. And if you find that you've got one of these strings is bad, just move your fingers around until you can get a clean chord. Just playing each string one at a time. When you have, you can then strum that out for the count of 8. And then instead of lifting your fingers off, I would leave my fingers down and I would look at the shape that my fingers are making, and also whilst I'm holding my fingers in that position for the count of 8, it's giving the muscles an opportunity to remember where they need to be to play that chord. So take your fingers off, put them back on again, pick out. If they're not in the right place and you're not getting a clean chord, adjust your fingers. Once they're in the right place, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 5, 6, 7, 8. Take them off, put them back on again and repeat. And I do that for all of my chords. And over time, and it is time, many hours, I'm tending to find now that almost with the D, my fingers will very often almost go down together. But that's coming, and it's still something that I've got to practice a little bit more. But I'm not worried about it anymore because I know it will happen. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And the number one thing here really is to practice, practice, practice. Don't give up. Keep practicing. The more hours you put in, the more your muscle memory kick in, the more your confidence will grow, and it will happen. So that's playing the chords generally. Now, just have a look at some of the main chords that I did and just some of the things that I picked up as I went along. So if I just pick out the E chord, now I'm not going to go through the fingering and how to play these chords because there's plenty of videos online that don't do that. But the E chord, just make sure that you get your fingers down as far as you can towards the frets. Same with all of the chords. And because my middle finger is halfway down the fret in the 2nd fret on the 5th string, I have to press that slightly harder than the others. But try not to press all of them down really, really heavily, even though that needs to be slightly more than the rest. And the other thing as well is just make sure that my hand was rotated around for this particular chord. I had to bend my wrist a little bit more so that I didn't mute that high E string, the 1st string, with my palm. And then again, just get the finger in, play it for 8, hold it for 8, and that was basically what I did with the E, and just off and on, off and on, off and on, and just keep on practicing that over and over and over. With the A chord I was struggling with quite a lot because there's two ways of playing it. You can either play with your 3 fingers in a diagonal line in fret 2, and a lot of people online will teach that, and I was struggling with that quite a lot. And then for chasing cars, Michael taught me a different way, which was to have my 1st finger on the 3rd string halfway down the fret, and then bring my middle and my ring fingers in so that I could play it that way. And I actually prefer playing that chord in that way because I've got used to that. Now there are times when you will need to play it the other way if you're coming into that chord from a different chord. But just bear in mind there are different ways of playing with playing the fingering of these different chords. Now, one of the things that I did as well in the early days is Michael has been picking tunes for me to play along with. So I did Chasing Cars, which was helping me with A, D and E, I think back in the day. And a lot of people say, oh crikey, you haven't been learning songs, what's going on? Well, one of the main reasons I haven't been learning full songs is we've been working on bits of songs that are helping me with the chords that I'm working with. So I think another hang up is don't get worried if you're not learning songs from day one. In my mind, I prefer to get the chords correct and then the songs can come later because they will sound a lot better. And that's another thing that we have been doing as we go along. If you want to have a look at the Chasing Cars video, I will link to that above. Have a look at that and you'll see that there's a practice session where I'm playing right the way through it. Okay, so the D chord was the one that I very, very nearly gave up on. It was an absolute nightmare for me and I struggled and struggled and struggled. Now I can pretty much play it straight away, and this is the one chord that when I'm struggling with other chords I come back to and I think, remember all that time that you struggled with the D chord and now you can play it straight away? That will happen with all the other chords if we give it some time. So with this one, again, the main thing was I was keeping my fingers together, so my ring finger was sliding back down the string, so I needed to remember to keep pushing it towards the fret. So thinking about the pattern of this particular chord, and very often with my middle finger I almost play that with my nail. to be able to fret that really, really cleanly, just because of the way that my fingers are formed, I think. But sometimes when you're fretting these chords, you've got to find your own way that works for you, because we're all different and no one particular style fits all. And again, with this one, make sure that your thumb is behind the neck, not over the top, because you see a lot of guitarists will play with their thumb over the top, and that's absolutely fine. But when you're learning, you'll very often find that your palm will catch the low E string if your thumb is over the top, so try and keep that round the back if you can. Okay, then we come to the G chord. Now the G chord was the first time that we introduced 4 fingers. Most of my other chords have been 2 and 3 fingers. 4-finger chord was an absolute nightmare, and one of the things that Michael taught me on this one very quickly was to place your fingers one at a time, starting with your middle finger on the 6th string, and then the others will follow. And the other thing that I found with this particular chord is, rather than having your the strings right on your fingertips, this is an interesting one, because your middle finger you can bring over the top of the 6th string, because very often I would find that I would mute the 5th string. So just bringing that over a little bit more worked. And then with your first finger, it doesn't matter if that is touching the 6th string, because you're already muting it in the 3rd fret, where we're playing the first finger in the 2nd fret. So again, that can be slightly high, so you don't mute the 4th string. And then we just need to bring our other 2 fingers in on strings 1 and 2. So for this one, I'm not necessarily using the absolute tips of my fingers, particularly for my ring finger, sorry, for my middle finger. This again is more about just getting my fingers in the right place. And the other thing with this particular chord I found is, if I was to bring my elbow out, don't bring your shoulder up, drop your shoulder, bring your elbow out, then again that made it much easier to be able to fret that particular chord. And again, my thumb has now come sort of around and almost at the top here of the neck, so that I can actually get that chord really, really nice. So with this particular chord, elbow out, ring finger down first on the top of the string, then your first finger, and then your ring and little finger. Now I get that pretty quickly, which is really, really good, because again, it's taken me a long time to be able to get my fingers down quickly. Can I put them all down at the same time? No. And I've been practicing this thing for hours and hours and hours. I would say probably done well over 10 hours of practice on this one. Probably more than 15. And I can now play it cleanly, which is positive. That's something that's good. But yeah, it takes quite a long time to actually get your fingers down all in one go. So the one that I'm working on at the moment is the C major chord, and when I first started to play the C major chord, because you put your first finger in fret 1, your second finger in fret 2 and your third finger in fret 3, you tend to put them down 1, 2, 3. That's the logical way of doing it. And very often when you're working online, guitar teachers just go bang. C has quite a long stretch. And one of the things that Michael told me, and this made a big, big difference for me, was to put your ring finger down first. So this is on the 5th string of the 3rd fret, and make sure that that is just behind the fret, so it's in the right fretting place. Then put down your middle finger, again in the 4th string, 2nd fret, just behind the fret, and then you can put your first finger down, which is going down in the 2nd string on the 1st fret. And then you tend to find that that helps with the stretch. I don't know why it is, but if you put your ring finger down first, it's much easier to make that stretch. Now with this particular one as well, I tend to bring my elbow right into my body And instead of playing with your fingers upright, which a lot of people online teach you so that you can do your pentatonic scale and some of the scales, with this particular chord, it's actually easier to bring your thumb around the back, almost at the headstock, bring your elbow in and have your fingers at a slant, and that way you're playing with the corner of your finger rather than the fingertip. And then, and I still haven't got this nailed by any stretch of the imagination, then you find I can actually do that a lot easier. Now don't worry if your ring finger is coming up and hitting the 6th string, because we don't actually play that. So if you are muting it, then it really doesn't matter at all, because you shouldn't be playing that one anyway. And make sure, one of the things that I do is just need to drop your wrist so that you're not muting the 1st string. So with this one, relax wrist, bend it around slightly, fingers at an angle, using the sides of your fingertips rather than the tops of your fingertips. And most of the time I can get a reasonably decent chord. So moving my hand position was really key with this particular chord. So we then have the D, we've got an A, E, the A, the G. This is assuming I'm naming these correctly. If I'm not, I apologise. And then we got the C. And you can see there how, particularly from the G, which is there, how very different my hand and my elbow is for playing that particular chord. So anyway, I hope that some of these tips you found useful. My number one tip would be to keep your fingers short, use the tips of your fingers, and practice. Like I said, I very nearly gave up because I thought it was too difficult. I then found a video that said, you know, 6-8 weeks to do the G chord is nothing unusual. So that blew away all of my preconceived ideas that I'd be able to do chords within a couple of hours. It's not that easy, and then when you get to changing chords again, that puts a whole new dimension. So first of all, just work on getting clean chords, trying to get your fingers down as quickly as you can on those clean chords. Work on that first of all, don't worry about anything else. If you can start to do some songs, and again, a lot of my videos have got all of the tabs that go with the songs that have helped me to learn the chords. You know, feel free to download those, available from the Google Drive. And just keep practicing and just enjoy what you're doing. Don't practice for too long so your fingers hurt. Don't press too hard so your fingers hurt, and you will get there, I promise you. So thank you very much for watching. Please like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe for new videos, and in the meantime I'll see you on another video coming very soon. Take care. Bye bye.